I was talking about the Video Vixens number where um, they sang like they were parodying the Runaways' Heavy Metal Chicks. And my part of that was to bring in a guy to stage it. I had, through my exploits as a studio musician, I had met a guy, no longer with us, but named Sean Delaney, and his claim to fame in the industry was that he used to work with Kiss, the band, and show them how to be rock stars. This was, again, early days of this type of stuff, and he had ideas on how to carry yourself like a rock star or how to stage things. And so I was encouraged to find somebody to be able to coach the girls and help us put this number together, and I brought him in. And he immediately started asking for things like flash pots, explosions, and stuff like that, which things that we used. So he did a good job, actually, because his job wasn't to say 5, 6, 7, 8 and be like a choreographer, but it wasn't to get them to look like a realistic band and the number to look like a rock number. And he did a very good job of it. And then I introduced him to Belushi, and these two guys from these two different areas of show business, but what they had in common was the love of staying up really late and partying all night. And the two of them together was, they couldn't stay together very long. They eventually exploded and went their own separate ways. But for a while they were a terror, the two of them. Neither of them living anymore.
A couple more names of the members of the cast and just a couple more SNL stories. Chevy Chase.
Well, very, very funny. When we see some of those, he was only there for 1 year and a few shows, but he was an original comedy voice and a very, very funny guy that would make all the rest of us laugh. I also had an awful lot of fun with him as I worked on his first special for NBC. After he left the SNL show, he got a deal with NBC for 3 specials, and I worked with him on the first one because I was already in Hollywood doing that thing that I mentioned with Kirshner and Norman Lear. I'm going to wait for this. So he could do funny things that nobody would think of, and he was also very musical and could play very nice piano and can sing. And he and I are still good friends.
Well, and you wound up hosting the Comedy Central Roast.
Yes, the Comedy Central Roast was a roast, maybe not one of their most successful ones. And it was something that I was thrilled to get to do. I think it caught Chevy off guard a little bit. I sang a song at the beginning of it called "We Couldn't Get Anybody Good," and it referred to the fact that booking the show was a little bit of a challenge. Chevy's friends from Hollywood, and the industry were not disposed to do this show, maybe because go figure, but some people don't want to be seen, even though it's bleeped, talking dirty on TV. The whole, and if I may plug my book again on Doubleday, but I do talk about how I don't think that the roast should be televised, even though I did that one. I think that the whole idea of the Friars Roast was, it's a thing that you just hear about, it's filthy as hell, but it's not for broadcast, and maybe a tape leaks out that you hear, of Don Rickles roasting Johnny Carson or something, but Other than that, you don't see it. And this thing, the fact that it was on TV, people that he knew, his friends, didn't want to do it. Also, he had had a little stretch of time where he hadn't worked all that much, and maybe it's not the best time to roast somebody when they're, when they're on one of those stretches where they're not working all that much. You're supposed to roast somebody when they're, they got 5 hot movies out. So, be that as it may, most of the people roasting him were people that he didn't even know. Hot comics that Comedy Central used to put in the places of people that might have actually known him. So you had people that he didn't even know being perhaps gratuitously mean to him. That's what I thought, and I think that caught him a little off guard. I don't blame him.
And lastly, and we mentioned him a bit, but Bill Murray.
Yeah, well, superb talent, monster talent, and also a loyal friend who was there in the days of 1974, the National Lampoon Radio Hour. That's when I first met him. We did a funny record album at that time called Goodbye Pop, and he did a very an early version of that show business character on that as he produced in the studio. He was a record producer producing Gilda, who was singing like a Helen Reddy kind of I Am Woman type of thing. And he's coddling her and treating her, like the star that she is. And then she has a breakdown, and she says, "I'm woman. I got a headache. I'm woman. I got a headache." Fun to see him find his way on Saturday Night Live, coming in to, be the guy who was essentially replacing Chevy. And Chevy had been such a sensation that it must have been a little bit daunting, and it took him a minute to slowly find how he was going to be such an important and valuable part of that show.
Now, towards the end of your tenure at SNL, you actually emerged and became a member of the cast.
I became a featured player. That's what they call like a supporting actor. And I was in a certain number. I would be featured on a certain number of the episodes that year. And it was hard to figure out things for me to do. I was happy to play the part of Robert Vesco, the crooked investment tycoon, before those things became so fashionable. Or I don't know if he was an investment tycoon or a sort of a political fugitive, and there was a Christmas show where all these guys who had disappeared from the face of the earth were doing their own Christmas special. On piano, Mr. Robert Vesco. That was just pretty much a bowing type of role.
Now,
but I did have a couple of roles during those days.
Now, there was one notable sketch where a word may have passed your lips that shouldn't have. Do you want to tell that story?
Sure, I've told it many times, but it was live TV, of course, and Franken and Davis were an on-camera comedy team and also a writing team, and they had an idea to take a tape, an audio tape that had circulated in the music business for some years. And it was a tape of an English band from the 60s named the Trogs. And the Trogs sang Wild Thing, You Make My Heart Sing. And there was a tape of them in the studio trying to figure out how to make a follow-up record to Wild Thing. And they weren't having any success recording, and they didn't know how to remedy the situation. They didn't know any musical terminology. All they did was kept talking to each other and using that obscenity. I don't know if we use it on this tape or not, but we can use it. So they were just saying, you had the fucking beat, and they were talking with these Cockney accents and saying, you were playing the fucking beat. What was the beat? You had it. You had the beat. You lost it. Well, they took that and they scribed it and they transposed the setting of it to be medieval England. And I was in the sketch as one of a group of medieval musicians rehearsing for a big concert for the Earl of something. And we were saying the words that the Troggs said on this tape, except that we couldn't say fucking this and sucking that, so we had made up our own word, flogging. Flogging. You had the flogging bait, but you lost it. And we had a great dress rehearsal. This flogging thing went over so well that Franken, in between shows, said to me, "You're doing so well with that flogging stuff that feel free to add some more of them." So on the air show, I was. And I was having all the fun you could possibly imagine, saying flogging this and the flogging that, and then I just slipped out. You had the fucking beat, and then that split second, I realized what I had done, and I've seen this tape, and I see myself say it, and then I look off like that, saying, "Oh my God, what have I done?" And then I look right back. Where are we in the sketch? I leave for a minute, then I come back to look at the cards. And I was really scared afterwards. I didn't know what was going to happen. Well, the first person that came up to me at the end of it was Lorraine. And she said, "Thank you for making television history." And I said, "Oh my God." And then Lorne came over, and I didn't know what he was going to say. And he said, "Well, he just broke down the last barrier." As it turned out, we were using those bad Cockney accents. I don't think anybody could really tell. It was buried among a lot of, dialect and stuff that you couldn't tell anyway, and apparently they didn't get any calls. And I think they did bleep it for the West Coast. But it went by, and most importantly, I think people knew that I hadn't done it intentionally.
But it happened, it went out over the air, and no one was penalized, the FCC didn't get involved.
Right. Different times, aren't they?
Wow.
But again, the British accents, it was hard to hear. Maybe it would have slipped by even in today's, since that wardrobe malfunction. Who knows?
All right, so after this year of you being a featured player, you left Saturday Night Live. Talk about that.
Well, everyone was leaving after 5 years. All of my friends with whom I had started working on that show were leaving. And Lorne was leaving. And although I got on very well with Gene Demanian, who was hired to be the producer after Lorne, whatever it was, they couldn't make a deal with him. They could make a deal with him. That's the way Kirshner would talk. Made a deal, they couldn't make a deal. For whatever reason, he didn't come back. And Gene got the job, and Gene offered me Howard's job as musical director. But I just thought that, 5 years seemed like a lifetime at that age, and I just couldn't see starting again with a brand new cast. And so I left with everybody else.
Was there an understanding that there was this sort of solidarity that when Lorne walked out of the building, everybody went with him, or did that just kind of happen?
I think it just happened, and I think it was coincident with the fact that maybe I don't know if they had 5-year deals or what, but the 5-year term was sort of up, and people were moving on to do other things.
All right, well, let's leap forward in time, and we're going to get as much as we can. Let's talk about how in 1982 you came to work with David Letterman.
Right after I left Saturday Night Live with everyone else, David got his morning show on NBC. He was starting the very next fall, in my recollection. And I got a call, would I like to come in and, and talk to the producers about doing the David Letterman morning show. And I think it was that I had just finished what seemed like a long, long run. Here I am 27 years later, still working for Dave now. But at the time, 5 years, that's enough. And let me try to do some other things. And the morning, Dave and I have a joke that we say on the air quite often. When he says, "Paul, you didn't do the morning show, did you?" And I say, "No." "Why not?" And I said, "Couldn't get up that early." It wasn't too far from the truth. I didn't want to start another show right at that time, and I didn't end up doing the show. But
now, did he approach you? Who approached you?
I don't remember, but except to think that I got a call. I mean, certainly the second time, when I was approached the second time, when he then was going to get a late night show to come on after Johnny Carson, even later than Johnny Carson, and that intrigued me. And at this time, I was approached by his management company, someone from the Rollins and Jaffe management company, who were the executive producers, or Jack Rollins was his particular manager and became his executive producer. Someone from that office come in and meet Dave and talk about this show he's doing after Johnny Carson. And so I came in and met with Dave and his producer at the time, not Jack Rollins, he was executive producer, but Barry Sand was the name of his first producer. I think he came aboard in the morning and then continued with Dave when he got his late night show. And I spoke to these two guys, and they asked, what kind of idea would you have for the band? And you can only have 4, yourself included. That's perfect for me, because that's exactly what I was used to. 4-piece rock bands. Godspell was 4-piece. I can do. And I had this concept of doing. Now I must say that Howard Shore did open up. We were the first. We weren't Carol Burnett. We also were not Carol Burnett-ish when it came to the band and the type of music that were played on the bumpers and stuff in and out of commercial. We were pretty contemporary. We were playing R&B and stuff. Original tunes that we were writing in an R&B style. I wrote some tunes that were kind of like Barry White, because that's what I was into at the time. So that barrier had been broken down. And now, when it was time for me to tell Dave what kind of band I would have, I thought back to my days of playing the clubs in Toronto and how they would play R&B instrumentally. And I loved to play the Hammond organ, and I said, well, how about, I think of it like an R&B instrumental band, like a Booker T and the MGs kind of thing. Playing Motown and Stax and soul music and playing instrumental versions of these things. And Dave said, well, he said, I've always thought of myself as Wayne Cochran anyway. Wayne Cochran being a little-known regional James Brown-style performer from Miami. And when I heard him say that, I said, this guy is hilarious. I've got to work for this guy. And he has since told me that he didn't really consider anybody else for the job. He saw me do the SNL thing, specifically mentioned the Bill Murray Lounge Singer sketches. And we hit it off that day in the meeting anyway, and he hired me.
So now talk about putting together the band.
This band.
Yeah.
Well, it was originally just me and 3 other guys. And I had been spending the 2 years doing studio work, getting more into the studio scene, knew the various performers in town. Will Lee was on the first session I ever did in town back in '74 on bass, and we clicked then, and he is impeccable bass guitar player, one of the greatest in the world, really one of the top three guys in the world. And he was in a band himself at this time called the 24th Street Band with other guys that I really liked. Steve Jordan, who I had already worked with on the Blues Brothers and used to work with in the studios a lot. Steve and Will were playing together. It made sense to, they were both too much on their instruments. It made sense to hire them both. And their guitar player, too, was the late, great Hiram Bullock. He only died within the last year. And I had worked a lot with him as well. He could play any style on the guitar, and it was really like a Hendrix quality, this guy. So I had sort of a band, ready-made band already. I couldn't hire the fourth guy, the keyboard player, Cliff Carter, but I still hire him now, when I need an extra keyboard or synthesizer player. And that was the original band, and we all liked the same music. Even though guys like Hiram were jazz players, Steve and Will too, really what they really liked was rock and roll and R&B. And the two black guys, Steve and Hiram, they said, do we have to play just Motown, and can't we play Rolling Stones and stuff like that? And they sort of opened it up to more of a white rock and roll thing too, not just soul. So that became the style of the music that I was playing. And wrote a little theme song that we still use. I wrote it in the style of an organ trio. Now I've kind of jazzed it up now that we're on CBS, and I was encouraged to add horns and make it a bigger band. So I got an extra guitar player, Felicia, on guitar, and 3 horns, and I kind of jazzed up the theme, but it's still the same melody as we started with 27 years ago.
And at what point were you dubbed the world's most dangerous band?
Not initially, but Dave started calling us that, and I don't remember exactly when, halfway through, but it's a term that he said came from the world of wrestling, the world's most dangerous something or other. He had some of his comic friends, I don't know whether it's Jeff Altman or whom, they had a game where one would name a wrestler and the other one would have to name his signature hold. So in that, and they knew them too, the real ones. Anyway, in that, inspired by that, I think he came up with this world's most dangerous band thing.
Now, look, before you guys went on the air,
Yeah.
did you talk at all about what your on-air dynamic would be?
In this original meeting, the two of them, Dave and Barry, the producer, mentioned that they were not going to have an Ed McMahon. He should rest in peace. Just died yesterday. That there would be no Ed type of character. Would I be the type of person who could play straight for Dave and be a guy that he could talk to and talk back? And I said, absolutely. And then I hoped that I could be. But I had had some experience doing acting on Saturday Night Live a little bit, and that Norman Lear thing that I did, and also just the funny people that I gravitated to during my career. Sid's Godspell, where I met some of the funniest. I learned a little bit from them. How to be funnier in real life. Reminds me, they used to do a sketch up there in Second City in the club. A school for people to try so they would be able to add more humor to their daily lives. And of course, the different people, Queen Elizabeth was there to take the course, and an undertaker, and they'd say, Your Majesty, show us what you do in your normal. She said, well, I would say, Prince Philip and I know, Your Majesty, if I could just suggest, put your hand here, Oh, Prince Philip and I see funnier already. So I said, yeah, I can be a foil for Dave. It took me a while to, Dave didn't know that really though, and so he never really addressed anything to me. one day he did, some weeks into the run, and I tried to speak and found that my mic wasn't even turned on. So I went to the engineer. I didn't know. I should have gone to the director, I guess, but I'd still only been on TV 5 years. I go to the engineer and say, I tried to speak and my mic wasn't on. She said, I don't think they want it on. Really? So then I went to the producer. My mic supposed to be off when I speak. Oh no, on. It's supposed to be. Well, could you please? So I had to get that straightened out. And then she knew that she was allowed to turn on my mic, and I just went for it one night and started talking in the style probably of a Sammy Davis or a Jerry Lewis, or the type of performer from the previous generation that fascinated me and that I would find so humorous, while at the same time respecting their talent so much. Whatever I said, Dave liked it and laughed. And he said, do more of that, and he encouraged me to. And that's how this relationship started.
At what point did he have you start contributing themes to all the different departments, and how did that as a running piece between the two of you develop?
I can't really remember any specifics, just that bits get written, and I think that he personally is a guy who came from, who did his share of broadcasting and DJing on the radio, and likes the show to be chock full of energy and music. And in order to keep things up and vibrant, things should have music at the beginning. Music at the beginning, music at the end. That's all I can think of.
Now, did you rely on more of your improvisational skills, or were there things that you'd written in advance, or both?
No, certainly improvisational skills. I just, stuff is written on this show at the last minute. And I had no recourse but to not obsess over it. Just know that I'm going to get stuff at the last minute and just see what pops into my head. And also, and I may have been one of the first guys to think this way, I don't have to write every original music, and keep all the money. What's more important to me is how lazy I am, and it's just to have to sit down and compose and write. I'd rather not have to do that. If I can just pick a song that already exists from my knowledge of all the tunes that I learned from my parents or the various rock and roll tunes, I can just put new words to it and have something right away. Or let me just sing something and see what pops into my head. And it's only there's one of 5 shows this week. There'll be another chance to get it right tomorrow night if I don't, so I don't take it too seriously and just come up with something quick.
Because he always seems wildly amused by almost sort of like, hey, Paul, can you give me a theme for this? And you come up with something.
Yeah, and we've also had some laughs on, him testing me or trying to do it at the last minute, or let's do it right on camera. But not always wildly amused. If he detects that it was maybe a little too easy, he will think nothing of saying, well, how long did that take you to write? 3 seconds? He doesn't care. So the stuff has to be, you can't write it in advance, and it can't sound too good, but it can't sound too bad either.
So, for example, if he was to say, hey, Paul Shaffer's got a new book coming out, we need a song that might plug that book. Paul, give me a song that would plug the Paul Shaffer book.
Well, the title of the book is We'll Be Here for the Rest of Our Lives. We'll be here for the rest of our lives. Kind of a thing a comic might say at the end. I'm here all week. try the veal. Well, I'll say we're here for the rest of our lives. And if I were to have to come up with a piece of music, I might say, we'll be here for the rest of our lives. We're not going anywhere. You know. Here for the rest of our lives. We've got no time to spare. We've got laughter and joy and familiarity. Something like that.
Perfect. Perfect.
But in
Exactly.
Dave's world, everything's got to be up. Boom, 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 boom. So I do it to a frantic beat like that. We'll be here for the rest of our lives. And I think I could sell that.
So is that his input that he would say to you, always up tempo?
Yeah, but you know what? He never really said it off camera. Only on camera. It's just the kind of way he runs his show. It's like a big game, and that's why it is so much fun. Because he'll say right on camera, well, now that we're all asleep, how am I supposed to get laughs coming off of that? You know, he'll say it right on TV, and eventually it'll get through my numb skull. Oh, I guess he wants things to have more of a tempo to them. All I know is that once I started playing things with that in mind, he was happier.
All right, you're giving us now a glimpse in sort of to the inner workings of the show. Talk a bit about really how the show comes together, how much Dave kind of is the ringleader of it all, and what you are and have been privy to all these years.
Well, of course, in such a long run, 27 years, I'm sure things have changed over the years, and I wouldn't know, how far back, what things were like before. Now my sense is, and I don't see a lot of it either because I don't have to come in first thing in the morning. I'm privileged enough to not to have to show up at the crack of dawn like a lot of the people here. But my assistant, Daniel Feder, gets here at about 10 in the morning. And shortly after he gets here, he attends a production meeting, at which time they have a big board and they have the acts and the commercials and what goes here, what goes there, and what goes there. And for a lot of the segments, they will be filled up with, a guest from the world of show business or athletics or something. And there is, of course, a staff of people whose job it is to book those guests. And then there are the other slots, which are filled up with comedy bits, comedy premises. There is a staff of writers that develops these things. And I don't know how much Dave is in on the stage at which they're discussing what should I work on, what should I develop. I think sometimes he might be in on it, sometimes he might not. But they have things that they work up, the writers. There are two head writers, Justin and Eric Stangl, who take all of the material from the other writers, collate it, pass stuff by Dave. He might say, develop that, work on that. My sense, though, is that when I see Dave for the first time, which is in the makeup room, about 45 minutes before the show, he seems to just be auditioning the material for the first time then. He's in, getting a little makeup, then they'll say, do you want to see that sketch? We put it on tape earlier. He used to come and rehearse in the afternoon. I remember that much. But after he had his heart surgery, he just for the hell of it gave up rehearsing. And things got a lot funnier and fresher when he gave up rehearsing. Then it was more like you would see on the Johnny Carson show. You had the idea that Johnny is doing it for the very first time. And whatever happens, happens. And that is truly the way it is on our show. So we don't rehearse at all. The director rehearses a little bit, gets some shots together, rehearses with stand-ins. Guys on the crew or writers stand in for Dave, or stand in for me and Dave. And they go through these things, but we don't have to rehearse them. So that they are for the first time. Anyway, I was saying that like Dave's getting on his makeup and they show him a thing. We taped this afternoon with some stand-ins and he'll take a look at it. And if it makes them laugh, okay, put that in, you know, and then they put it in, they'll show it to them. I thought we might go this, this, this. And now there's only a minute left. And you say, is that the best you have for? Well, we could find, it looks like they put it together in about 5 minutes. I'm sure there's more to it than that. But I have a feeling that he purposely doesn't want to see anything until he goes right on the air. Maybe it's more like he evaluates it in the heat of the moment and sees, maybe that to him is the acid test. I don't know. But at the last second, they seem to put together the rundown. I mean, it's a joke when I see Jude Brennan, who is one of the executive producers, who's in charge of, one of the things she does is give me the rundown. And she pretty much says every day, Act 1, and we don't really know what that's going to be. And I say, well, why is this any different than yesterday? You didn't know that either. And then I think, in Act 2, no, we can't really say, but we know Act 3, Uma Thurman's coming out. And that, and then at last second, something gets thrown in there. And then they will change it at the last minute, too. Sometimes I play during the commercials in real time, and we usually come back in about the length of a real commercial, or maybe sometimes a little earlier. But once in a while, they will leave me playing a whole song, and then I might have to play a second song while they're over at the desk figuring out, we better not do, let's change such and such because of this, and they'll come up with a spontaneous idea right at the very beginning, and just an extra 30 seconds of music while I figure out something, and very much seat of your pants though type of television for sure, and that is the secret to doing it this long and still looking forward to coming into work every day.
Is the spontaneity.
Spontaneity, and then the quality is kept up to the level that it is by Dave himself, who really will never throw away a show. Every show he does, he goes for it and tries to do his best show ever, and he is, as you know, the fastest and funniest out there, and it's really a kick to work with him every night. Because it's going to be different every night.
Talk about Dave as a guy. You've worked together so long.
Terrific guy. He has been nothing but the best with me. Patriotic. Went overseas right when war was declared in Afghanistan without any publicity or without going to tape a segment for his show. He took me and Biff in a plane over to Afghanistan, and we just palled around with the troops on Christmas Eve, and then did it the next year in Baghdad, and the next year at other points in Iraq. Again, not keeping it quiet, not to get any publicity out of it, not to get a segment out of it, just out of a sense of doing his duty. I think that. What more can you say?
Again, you've worked with him so long. How have you seen both he and the show, well, both shows, evolve over the years?
I think that when we were on at 12:30, there were more chances taken, more radical things done. That show where where the whole frame turned around 360 degrees over the course of an hour. Very radical things that I don't think would be done now that we're on in the 11:30 spot. I think those things were just, Dave kind of thought of that as something that you can get away with at the later hour, and if it works, great, and if it doesn't work, not all that much lost. I think now there is more of a the necessity, the obligation to do stuff that is going to be reliable, because the audience is bigger. I will say that I think that the other hosts are, in many cases, doing not much more than just the stuff Dave was doing at 12:30. Still doing those things. Dave is more like the established guy now that people take off from, as opposed to the guy that was taking off on it. the establishment before. It has been 27 years.
And how has he, I mean, as sort of the young upstart in '82 and now sort of the veteran and kind of the gold standard, how have you seen him change over the years?
Outside of maturing, I don't think he's changed all that much. He still is hilarious, a truly funny guy. And I think that there was a time, when during the late show wars, or whatever they called that book, where he was under more pressure. But now I don't think he is so much, and truly tries to do the funniest show. And he also has the range to be able to do a serious conversation with a politician or an environmentalist or something like that, but still know that it is an entertainment show and still entertain.
Let's hit a few highlights and mile markers through the years. On the old show, on the show on NBC, probably one of the most historic things, really, in my life, in the history of television, was the Sonny and Cher reunion. And you played behind them for that and were part of that. Talk about your memory of that show.
Well, for openers, my wife, Kathy, we've been married 19 years, she was one of the two original talent coordinators on this show, on the evening show. Kathy Vassapoli was her name then, before I married her, and she had a relationship with Cher and her manager at the time through the years of booking. And Cher had a new record and was going to come on, and Kathy was arranging for her to come on this show and perform her new record with my band. And I had known Cher from back in the 70s, and I did some recording with her. During the course of the conversations with Cher, I think she spoke not only to the manager, but with Cher personally. Kathy has told me that Cher said, Sonny, what about we could get Sonny too to be on the show, not to perform, just to do an interview. And I think Cher knew that in that way the whole show could be basically about her, Cher. And I think that she would not in any way mind my having said that. But in no way did she want to perform with them, and she made that clear. But I don't think anybody believed her. Nonetheless, no for an answer, but, just in case. I had a couple extra musicians in the band to do her number, just in case, we went through I Got You, Babe, you never know, and he did, spur of the moment, will you work with Sonny? They were both on the panel doing an interview, and just the audience rush of applause and whoosh, just at the suggestion of it. And right on that whoosh, I started playing, just playing the music, so there wasn't much else they could do. And the energy sort of carried them center stage, and it was quite a sentimental moment when they went into it.
And emotionally, how did you observe them performing together?
Oh, certainly a nostalgic feeling. And when he said, "Put your little hand in mine," he grabbed her hand. I remember, I could see it live, and it was like, "Oh, what a great little touch," So it was sort of a wistful moment for sure.
Are there other great musical memories that obviously may have not had the impact that had, but that were special to you from that show?
Well, that show?
From the NBC show.
Well, the first time that James Brown appeared, and he was one of the early guys to come on our show as a musical guest. And he may have come on because we were playing his music right from the get-go for bumpers and commercials. And he maybe heard it because when he decided to come on, I got a message from his agent. "Hey, James wants to know what you guys want to play with him." And I said, "Wow, the Godfather wants to know what we want to play with him." But we were so well versed in the lexicon of James Brown that we all sent our favorite songs, and he did two of them. And it was, I never thought I was going to get to play music so good, because when he started singing and shaking his ass, there was no way but not to be funky. It was really a rush. And so much so that he heard us do a third song. You know, these are the days when we used to do two, but he heard us doing a third one during the commercial. And he just said to David, spontaneously, "I'd like to do, can we close with that third one?" And Dave says, "Yeah, we'll take a commercial and we'll do that." And he just did a third one without any rehearsal at all. That was terrific. Every time I worked with James Brown was like a music lesson. And after that, he did it many times during his lifetime.
Talk about that last show with Springsteen.
Well, I think that Springsteen was somebody that we were trying to get on since we went on the air. And he finally was going to come on to do the last show and do Glory Days, and that was so thematically right on for the last show on NBC. He's a hell of a band leader. He got the arrangement together, and then he said, just before the thing was over, he said, "This organ, is it solid? Is there like a good structure to it?" And I said, yeah. And I knew he was going to jump on top of it, which he did. You know, he jumped right up there for the last chorus. And, "All right, dun, dun, dun." He was right on top of the organ playing it. But he didn't do it in rehearsal. Just, you know, he just knew that he was going to do it. Big
showman.
film. Yeah, great showman.
All right, so now talk a bit of your recollections of when you ultimately knew you guys were going to be leaving NBC and going to CBS, and what you were privy to and what you talked about in making that transition.
Yeah, I wasn't privy to all that much. But I've certainly, it's no secret that Dave would have loved to have done the Tonight Show and gotten that spot, but it didn't work out that way, and he got this wonderful offer from CBS where they were going to buy the whole Ed Sullivan Theater. There was a chance that we might have been asked to move to California for a while. We didn't know, but then when this theater became available, and I heard that it was Hal Gurney, the director, our director at the time, that it was his idea to check out the Sullivan Theater, and of course it comes with such a pedigree and such tradition that everyone was very excited about that concept of moving the show into the Ed Sullivan Theater and staying in New York to do it. I did have a discussion with Dave about the band and perhaps keeping it with just the four-piece band, but he said, "I don't care how you expand it, but I want a bigger unit. It's a bigger show. It's just, the other thing is more of a combo." And it was true. It was inspired by a combo band, so that's how I came to expand the band. And I'm still working on retaining the ability to play anything at the drop of a hat and not have to write anything down.
Did you talk at all about making any alterations to your dynamic or your on-screen persona with the new show?
Only that I became aware that Dave's preference would be for me not to spout a Jerry Lewisism just for the sake of doing it and getting a laugh at how arcane it might be. but rather to have a real conversation with him and truly improvise. Let's just see, where it leads. I say something, you say something. That was the change. And it took a little while for that to develop. It was like going back to square one a little bit. But then eventually it did. Because there's so many shows. That if it's not there on one show, maybe it'll be there on the next. That's the only difference that I can see. And we're a little farther apart, I think, but maybe not too much farther apart on this slightly bigger stage. Certainly the angles were important to Dave when we came over here. He wanted it such that when he was sitting at his desk, looking at the audience, that he would look here and I would be right there as always, not over here or over here. And when he's at the monologue mark, if he turn around, I'm there. That was important, to have that same relationship physically, so that it wouldn't be too different. He likes consistency, same thing every night. And so he wanted that even though the band would be a little bit bigger, he wanted my relationship with him spatially to be the same.
But you couldn't continue to be the world's most dangerous band.
That's right. That was that thing about intellectual property. NBC said, any ideas that you came up with over here, they're part of this show. They remain with the late night title. And I loved the world's most dangerous band title. But even though I tried to get special dispensation to bring it, it was part of a larger issue.
What are some of your most favorite musical memories now from this incarnation of the show?
They're still coming at me. We still have a possibility of having something great happen any night. That Iggy Pop, with Flatboy Slim, that's the name of the DJ that I was trying to remember. Number from the other night was great, and Iggy's spontaneity as a performer, he was singing to me on with his mic at one point, and I got to sing my background, with his head right here onto the same mic, and I got a big kick out of that. I think that yearly, at Christmas time, when we play that number from the Phil Spector Christmas album from 1963, the one that Darlene Love sings, "Christmas Baby, Please Come Home," and we recreate the Spectorian wall of sound with its strings and horns and saxophones and chimes and all of that stuff. That is a highlight every year, because Darlene rocks it hard every year. That's a big one for me, a good one for me.
One of the more memorable ones to me was the Warren Zevon show. Do you want to talk a little bit about your memories of that?
Well, to back up for a minute, I was saying that Dave likes everything to be the same. Doesn't like to be thrown off by something changing, and so it's very difficult for me to take time off. Because when I would take off a show, or if I'm sick or something and somebody else is in my place, it always throws him to look over, and it's different over there. So this one year when I had to take 2 weeks off, unprecedented, because I was going to get to be in the Blues Brothers movie sequel. Couldn't be in the original Blues Brothers movie because I was working with Gilda Radner and got into a big scheduling conflict. But for the sequel, Danny Aykroyd, true loyal friend, got me on the sequel anyway, and I had to take 2 weeks off. And how am I going to replace myself? And it was Sheila Rogers, our head talent coordinator, who came up with the idea of Warren Zevon, because we all knew that he was one of Dave's favorite recording artists and writers. So Zevon became my go-to sub. He was so successful, and he was the one guy that Dave got a kick out of seeing when he would look over there. My favorite recording artist. And not only that, but Dave started requesting that every song be one of his songs. So it became, as I used to say, all Zevon all the time. Every song a Warren Zevon song, and his relationship with Dave and with the show became quite special. And then, of course, he was diagnosed with lung cancer, and he was the kind of guy who never went to a doctor. And so, you know, maybe he could have been saved, but by the time it was diagnosed, it was too late, and we all felt just terrible. And then Dave he did a whole show about him. And Warren was a little weak from the chemotherapy, but still flew from the West Coast, performed 3 songs, rehearsed them all with me and the band, all 3 of them in about an hour and a half. And even though I was saying to him, Warren, you know, save your vocal cords, don't sing out in every rundown, he couldn't help himself. It was too much fun. And maybe certainly his last TV performance, maybe that was his last live performance. Well, it was very moving, on so many levels. And he said to me, just keep up, keep the jokes coming, I don't want anybody feeling sorry for me. And that was the way Dave's interview was too. No pity or anything like that, even though he was terminal. And Dave said, what can you tell us? In the position that you're in with a terminal illness, do you know anything about life that you think you could share with us? And Warren said, not unless I know how important it is to enjoy every sandwich. And if that could be my legacy, just having said that, I'd be happy.
And it's so typically Zevon. I mean, profound and wry and funny all at the same time.
Yeah, enjoy every sandwich.
What are your recollections of when Dave was dealing with his heart issues and had to go into the hospital and had to miss a number of shows and then came back from that?
There's certainly concern, and nobody I knew had such a serious operation. Happy that he had come through it so well. He was away longer than we showed reruns for a while. Then the network really couldn't abide by that any longer, and we had to start producing new shows as we sort of killed time and waited for him to return. We were in Los Angeles doing kind of remotes with different Hollywood stars and talking about the times when they had been on the show and stuff like that. Then we started doing guest hosts, which we had never done, never had a guest host. Not like Johnny Carson. Dave never had a guest host, but that was a crazy thing that I used to skip those shows too, because contractually I didn't have to work if Dave wasn't going to work, and I thought, I should just reserve my services for when the man is behind the desk.
Yeah, but didn't you get to host as well?
That more recently I did. That was when he got sick again. He had some kind of a shingles or something, and that's when I got to host. And I got to host another time the day that he had his son, when he couldn't make it back from the hospital. So I got to host those 2 times. But the other thing we were talking about was his heart surgery. Yeah, he came back early, before mere mortal would come back to work, but he really wanted to get back. And it was certainly great to have him back. Really did miss him.
You want to do a tape change real quick?
Okay, well, let's see what time it is.